Servants of the Paraclete Center in Jemez Springs, New Mexico, is connected to a damning report done by a grand jury in Pennsylvania.
Where did a lot of the bad priests go? Well, if you've been following what we've been talking about lately, New Mexico. In my last video, when we were speaking about Epstein's Zorro Ranch, I mentioned
the servants of the Paraclete out in Jemez, which I'll make you a video about that one too, but if you want to Google it, be ready to be horrified.
Since it is relevant for this video, my name is Deva. I hold degrees in both sociology and criminology, as well as a certification in social justice. I was lucky enough to study under Dr. Kathleen Holscher for my last 2 semesters at UNM, where I took classes on the history of Catholicism in America, as well as the history of this problem in New Mexico. Dr. Holscher is an associate professor of religious studies, as well as being the endowed chair of Roman Catholic studies at the University of New Mexico. She has dedicated a large part of her life to getting these records out there and helping people tell their stories, as she also grew up Catholic and has that perspective as well. That being said, I'm going to give you some resources. If you go read that stuff, please prepare yourself, because it's largely unredacted. Names have been taken out, but stories are usually there in their entirety, and they are really, really hard to read. That being said, I'm not going to go into those in their entirety here. However, it'll still be a little rough video. If you need to scroll, that's fine, but let's get to the point. Servants of the Paraclete was established in 1947 in Jemez, New Mexico by Father Gerald Fitzgerald. He originally did not have this mission, though. This was something that was actually forced on him by the higher-ups, because although this happened in New Mexico, this was literally an international problem. It has come up in other countries' depositions, that sort of thing. When he opened it for priests who were struggling with substances. He really did genuinely want to help. Then, almost immediately, there's a letter that is sent to the higher-ups saying, wait a second, why did you send someone like this here? Although this was not the Servants of the Paraclete's initial goal, they wanted to be helpful, but not to that kind of person. That was not their jam, right? So one of the first letters sent out of that place in 1948, this is on bishopaccountability.org if you want to go read those, but that warning stands, saying that he doesn't understand why this type of problem person is sent there, and he's really not cool with that. Then we get to a letter in 1957 where he says that he will deny entry to that type of rattlesnake. In 1950, Fitzgerald, who was so frustrated with this, even sent a letter saying, can we just send them all to an island? You guys can afford an island, because of course you remember one of the biggest parts of this being a problem. There was never speak of turning them into law enforcement, laicizing them, which means removing their priesthood. That happened to very, very few people. They would just kind of shuffle them around, and this was a big shuffling spot. Back to that island retreat thing, though, one of the priests actually borrows enough money, $28,000, to purchase an entire island, but is told by the Archdiocese of Santa Fe, this is not going to work. Why did you do that? You should have asked first. Sell it. Fitzgerald was extremely outspoken about this until his passing in 1969, including meeting with the Pope himself in 1963 and explaining that these people need to be looked into. If they've got a history, they should be laicized. Fitzgerald's outspokenness was met with him being told directly to cooperate and do what he was supposed to do. After his passing, people were installed that weren't really going to argue with what was going on.
Ron Wolf in 1993, he put it this way.
In New Mexico, we became the garbage heap, the dumping ground.
This place was so popular, there was actually a pamphlet for it that explained why you were going to this retreat for renewal. Keep in mind a lot of the people that were going there. Now let's zoom in on one part so you can get an idea of what you would have done there. Now, on top of the therapies, which big air quotes on that one, I'm sure you can imagine there were some problems with that, you would get to participate in the recreation program, which included a golf course, swimming pool, pool tables, bowling, all kinds of stuff. This is a pretty large place. Now, some people ended up staying there forever, but a lot of them were redistributed to other parishes in the area that were largely located in rural areas and a lot of places that were either non-English speaking or on a reservation. This is another resource also created by my professor, and this follows just specifically the Jesuits and everything that happened in those areas. This map is not just of New Mexico, it is nationwide, and again, look at your own risk. This is something that higher-ups were largely aware of, because to be sent to Jemez, you had to have credible accounts. And keep in mind, since police weren't involved or real investigators or anything like that, it's what they thought was credible. So of the ones that we know about, there are guaranteed a ton more. But for that to happen and you to get sent down here, there had to be communication between your archdiocese and your bishop and the Archdiocese of Santa Fe. Servants of the Paraclete officially stopped functioning in this capacity in 1994, and it is largely unknown how many people went in here, then were put back out and reoffended, or were just the worst of the worst, went in there and went somewhere else and no one spoke about it again. Because the reason that we know as much as we know were when these records were unsealed because of lawsuits in 2009, as well as a gigantic flurry of records that has just started being released this year. Although this facility allegedly stopped running in this capacity in 1994 and is now only a visitor center, they have another one in Missouri, and I do say allegedly because I see how much was covered up in allegedly. This new release comes after the Archdiocese of Santa Fe had to declare bankruptcy from the sheer number of claims. And one of the addendums of the survivors before the bankruptcy could be discharged is that they released their records in full regarding all of this. Professor Holscher and a very nice human named Avi have spent their summer and will continue to spend the next quite a while going through these records and publishing them online in an archive so that these people can finally see their stories told. And this is where I tell you this is so important to the people who survived this, because no one listened, they were silenced, they were treated terribly, and they're glad that they have an opportunity now that people will really know what happened. You can find these records in the digital repository on the University of New Mexico's website. You do not need to be a student or any official capacity, anything kind of person to look at these, and they encourage that. This is the reason they wanted them released. They want people to know what really happened. And like I said, this is only, what's in there right now is only the first set that's been released. There's a ton more. One thing I like to point out is I didn't really realize until I took this class how many whistleblowers there were and how they were treated, because it wasn't everybody, but the people higher up just wanted to avoid scandal, when in reality, if they had headed it head on, I think it would have turned out a lot different, but hey, choices were made. That's about it for this one. I hope you guys have a good day, and tomorrow is my birthday, so you're not going to see me, but I will meet you on Thursday, where we will start shining happy people too.